Welcome, everyone. Super excited today to have Lindsay Kobolt on the show. She's the Director of Counseling and Community Wellbeing at her school in Kansas City, Missouri. And Lindsay is passionate about advocating for well-being initiatives in school systems. You're going to hear about this in our conversation. And when the challenges of parenting, being an educator, and striving for excellence became too overwhelming, Lindsay found her way to mindfulness practices for both herself and her students. And I know a lot of us can relate to this and her story. Today, we're going to talk about letting go of perfection and the pressure to always be available to everyone at every moment, right? We all know how we are as givers, and exploring strategies to release the burden of constantly striving for perfection. We're going to talk about the importance of consistency and patience in mindfulness practices. I think Lindsay has a great point of view on this, and really understanding that this journey takes time and patience and consistency to really bring these practices into your daily life. And navigating your inner critic. You're going to hear Lindsay talk about how she deals with the inner critic and how she uses mindfulness practices to overcome self-doubt. And finally, how to approach each day with love and curiosity, and learning how to meet the day with a sense of curiosity and seeing it as an opportunity for growth and learning. Hope you enjoy the episode. Thanks, everyone. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited today to be here with Lindsay. Lindsay, how are you doing today?
I'm great, David. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to be with you. And we both have like 80-degree weather today. So I think we're going to have a great conversation.
Yeah, the weather always helps when it's good. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'd love to just start by, kind of getting to learn a little bit more about you and kind of understanding your journey with mindfulness and becoming a counselor.
Yeah, great. I'd love to share that story. I'm a person who's just been drawn to children since I was young. I was an only child, and I sought out younger kids often. I liked that role of being the bigger kid and caring for younger kids.
Yeah.
And so I'd always knew that I wanted a career with children. And I actually started as an education major and really was connecting more with my sociology classes. And so I went that route and did a health and wellness minor along with that. And
Oh, cool.
kind of found myself really gravitating toward mental health through that work, and went into graduate school pursuing a mental health degree, and found my way back to education and kids as a school counselor. And so that was a really kind of roundabout way to get right back to where I thought I would be in the first place, which was in schools, but in a very different angle, working with kids as a school counselor. And part of that process was when you're doing your graduate degree in counseling, my program had us go to counseling ourselves and be in the client side of that.
Right.
And I'll never forget the counselor that I saw. She said, "No, if you're going to go into this profession, you're going to have to get much thicker skin."
Sounds about right.
And so that was kind of my first real experience with taking care of myself and how I show up and like what I do for me and how I work on myself, having an impact on my work. And of course, I really resented her at the moment, and I was so glad that she would say that to me. And I thought, that's not a very counselor thing to say.
Right.
But I really thank her, now in hindsight, because she was right that how I show up at work is going to influence my work. It's going to influence the people around me. And, you just realize working in education that a lot of people are pulling on you all of the time.
Yeah.
And you're giving.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of ultimately what led me to start exploring mindfulness.
Okay. Oh, so tell us all about that. I want to hear this.
Yeah. Well, so funny enough, as most educators, I came to mindfulness first by learning about it for my students.
Yeah.
And, I think that's an easier in for a lot of educators because we feel like sometimes taking care of ourselves is not taking care of our students. There's a lot of like guilt and all kinds of things wrapped up in putting our work aside to do something for us when our job is to give to others. And so I was really fortunate. We have a mindfulness coach at our school who had just kind of started working in our preschool classes very organically. And I thought, yeah, I need to learn more about, mindfulness. And I started learning about meditation a little bit. And, the universe works in funny ways. My husband came home from work at one point and was talking about the speaker that they'd had who'd been talking to them about meditation. And I was coming home from work very stressed.
Yeah.
And he was like, maybe you should try this. But it was perfect timing. And I was like, yeah, actually, I've kind of been thinking about this for myself as well. But still wasn't feeling like I could really do that for myself. I had 2 small kids. I was, trying to give everything to my job. And so I started learning about it for my students. And just, again, going through that awareness building of what building new systems in your body and training your body to slow down and to be present, and how that really impacts everything around you. I would practice a little bit with my students. We would do some meditations, and largely just one-on-one with students who seemed open to it.
Yeah.
And I was finding that I would leave those sessions with students feeling much better myself.
Right.
As well. And so I came across one of the apps, and do I say names of apps?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So the Calm app was actually right around the pandemic. They offered it free to educators.
Right. Okay.
And so I was able to try that. And I loved it. It was so helpful. It was a great tool, and I still use it every morning to this day. And that's just part of my morning routine, because I think honestly, that was the hardest part for me, was once I wanted to start using it for myself, figuring out how to make it a part of my day and part of my practice.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So much good, juicy information. So one of the things I wanted to say is that I'm really seeing that this is a through line that I've heard in a lot of my stories from my guests, is that they started practicing mindfulness for themselves because they were teaching it to their kids.
Mm-hmm.
So as you said, like, you felt like it seemed like, oh, well, I'm learning about through them, and now I'll try it for myself. And it would be really nice to do it the other way around, right? Which is one of the reasons I started the podcast. So that saying this, I feel like I say this in every guest I interview, we have this conversation, but it's like, taking care of yourself actually makes you a better educator and makes you better for your kids. But we've been so brainwashed to believe that we have to give, and give some more. Yep. And we're not allowed to take care of ourselves. So I'm really glad you brought that up.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that common experience. But I'm a big proponent of it starts with adults. I think when we practice as adults, that is almost the intervention for students, because they feel it from us. They feel that we're coming into a space well-regulated.
Yes.
That we can kind of sit in an uncomfortable moment with them.
Yeah.
We don't feel as much pressure, I think, to have all the answers.
Yep.
Which is another huge burden that I think sometimes can land on educators' shoulders unintentionally, or maybe intentionally, that they have to know what to do about everything that shows up in their room.
Yes.
Mindfulness has really helped me be okay with, I don't have to have all of the answers for everything that shows up.
Right. Yeah. And it's so interesting, because as I was going to share a story, we do a social emotional learning circle at my school, and we actually started it with the teachers before. So the school's now in its 8th year, but when the first year when it opened, we did this circle program with the teachers only. And I got so much pushback, because they're like, well, we want to do it with our kids. And I'm like, well, would you want to go and teach calculus before you took a class in calculus? Like, it's just so to me that we would say, we're going to go teach mindfulness to kids when we don't have a practice ourselves. So it's like, my theory was, okay, if the teachers really own and believe in this circle, then they're going to believe in it. I mean, sorry, if they're doing it, then they'll believe in it, right? And they'll do it with more fidelity. And what ended up happening is we ended up doing a certification for this program, and we always have the highest investment score. So they do all this data, and we're
Yeah.
always 97%. Like every adult who runs a circle, basically everybody but one person, right? Like who's that one person? But yeah, 97% who's like, we're fully invested in the circle because we spent so much time getting the adults invested before we started doing it with the kids.
So amazing. Well, and I think you can almost cause harm to a practice if you have teachers who aren't invested that are
Right.
delivering it, because our kids are intuitive beings and
Yes,
you
they
need
are.
that from an adult a mile away. Like,
Oh, a mile away. Yeah.
yes, this teacher does not believe in this. They can pick it up even if you never say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the other part of your story that I found really fascinating is that, so you started seeing kind of people doing doing the mindfulness with your one-to-one sessions. Then you're like, I got to try this for myself. And then you notice, and then you use the Calm app. I wanted to actually follow up with because I think what happens is people that are listening are probably thinking the same thing you were thinking, which is I'm a busy educator. I have all these kids in my classroom, or I have all these, counseling students coming in and out of the office. Like, where am I going to find the time? And so I think that's like always the number one obstacle, which is why I told you before we hit recording, I always talk about the janitor closet, but I do have different examples now. I have some new ones for my listeners. I also have meditated in an airport bathroom. I have meditated in the middle of the airport. I have meditated on an airplane. I have meditated, so it's like, I have meditated when I've had a really difficult parent meeting. I've said, oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, I have to run something really quickly. I'll be right back. And I just literally go sit in the stall, close the door, and just take 2 minutes to breathe, right? And just to get myself back to where I'm not going to be rude and go down to kind of their level of anger. And so I'd love to just kind of hear, you're using the Calm app, how are you incorporating this into your daily life?
Yeah. So I found for me, I'm a morning person anyway. And I like to wake up before my kids get up and have some time that's just mine in the morning. And so I just really shifted a few things around in my routine where I could build some of that time in my morning as my meditation time. I also have found that the longer I do it, the quicker a meditation practice can bring me that centering feeling. So
Yes.
I would say that to people who are just getting started, like stick with it, because it will become a quicker practice for you when you need it to be, because your brain and your body will get intuitive. They'll say, oh, I know what we're doing here.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
We're disengaging from the stress cycle
Yeah.
and we're getting to a better place, and it can get there faster. But I even will find pockets of my day. Same thing as you, if I know there's something coming up in my calendar that I need to be on my A game for, I'll carve out time in my calendar before then, even, a 5 or 10 minute window where I'm going to shut my door. I'm going to walk outside for a moment, whatever it might be, to give myself a few minutes, just to get my breathing slowed down, pay attention to how I'm holding my body, my shoulders up in my ears, like, just really, and I find that those meetings are more productive.
Yes, absolutely.
I walk out of there feeling like I built a partnership with someone, or, I was able to bring someone maybe who comes in very escalated down. It's been such worthwhile time. So it might be hard to make those 10 minutes happen, but you get it back in spades, because now I'm not having to, talk to my principal about how this meeting went south and it's not right, and I need to let you know.
Yes.
I get the time back, and I feel like I can be more at peace as well with drawing other boundaries. It's like a stair step to other boundaries, to saying to myself, I actually don't need to get on my email this evening.
Yes.
Home.
Oh my gosh. No, that's so smart. I think what you're bringing up, and this is what I teach. So I do mindfulness programs for educators. I don't do it for kids. I probably will at some point, but for educators. And I always start with them and just say, the first thing we're going to do is basically be aware of like where you are.
Yes.
Are you, what's your, and then I do a really simple, just like, what are you feeling? What do you need? And I'm like, just do that for a week. And then when I see you next week, tell me what you've learned. And what you're sharing is that you start to build that muscle of awareness, start to see like, oh, just by doing, and what I have found is by doing the 10 minutes of meditation in the morning. I actually am not a morning person, so I want people to hear this, because everyone's like, you're supposed to meditate in the morning. And then for years, I just couldn't do it in the morning because I'm like falling asleep, or I just don't want to do it in the morning because I'm grumpy, right? And so I'm still grumpy in the morning, but I've been since I was a kid. But anyway, but then I will find, I'll do it like 10 a.m., which is, later in the morning, or I will do it, I'll just find different times throughout the day. What I was going to say though, is that I find the time that works for me, right? What's best for you. And like you said, you build that habit. And now when I go throughout my day, it's almost like I've switched the default from stressed out to more of a calm meditative space, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, another thing that I wish I had kind of understood earlier on is that I still benefit from a meditation practice if I feel distracted.
Yes.
In that time, I was talking with some friends actually about a couple of weeks ago, and they mentioned trying to meditate and how like, I just can't do it. I keep thinking about the to-do list or whatever. And I'm like, but that's it. It's noticing, I keep thinking about my to-do list, and it's that building awareness. And if you can get past the like being tough on yourself about how you're meditating and just accept that whatever's coming up for you during that practice time is what's coming up for you, it's really freeing.
No, I love that. And one of my favorite teachers that I follow, I think I talk about him every podcast. His name is Michael Beckwith. He's the minister at Agape International Spiritual Center in Los Angeles, but he has a online, you can watch it online, and he has a weekly meditation on Sunday mornings. And he regularly says, the number one most important thing is to label your meditation as good or bad.
Right.
Because it's just ironic. It's like what we do in the West, right? We have to evaluate and say that meditation was bad. And it's like every time you do that, you're going to judge yourself. And it's like you said, it's a complete opposite of the point of meditation. It's just like observe what you're feeling, and there's no good or bad, and you're just feeling it. And every meditation is different, right? And so it's never going to be the same. Sometimes, I know this happens to you, but sometimes I'll have all these like epiphanies and insights and a really good meditation, and then the next day I'll be like, oh, all I could do was think about that report I have to do.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and it's that same thing, that's kind of almost what helps me separate sometimes in the evenings when I know I need to step away from work. I need to focus on my family or give myself some me time, and I'm having some guilt around that. Is I just go right back to that same practice, like because I feel like I should be doing it this way or that way.
Right.
Doesn't mean that I should. And, same thing with a meditation practice. Like I might be thinking, gosh, I'm really not doing this very good today.
Right.
It's all relative, there's a flip side to that coin. Like, but I am doing it, and I am being aware of and I am leaning in and paying attention. And just the same, if I turn off my work for the day as I'm leaving the building, what am I turning my attention to?
Yes. And I love what you said about how, as you get the meditation, you do the meditation in the morning, you get it back in the 10 minutes in spades, because you said, like I'm not as stressed, or I'm not going to go and like run to my computer or do 5 more emails. And so it starts to bring more peace and calm to your day. And it sounds like also for you, what I heard is that, when you're going to have one of those meetings or something like that, you are able to kind of like shift. But I also like to teach the art of what I call the art of the shift, meaning that you can be aware of where you are, and then you start to develop tools to shift yourself. So, my joke about going to the bathroom during a tough meeting, or you getting ready for a meeting by taking some deep breaths or whatever, or kind of, getting yourself centered again. And then, like you said, it saves the time of not having to talk about all the problems. You're creating more peace and calm in your life by following these practices in general.
Absolutely. It's so true. It's so true. And I think I don't know where I wanted to go with that. But yeah, no, I just agree. I think it's really powerful. It goes beyond that practice. It starts to show up in every part of your day, every part of how you interact with others. And, I'll catch myself now, like for me, it's my neck and shoulders, and I just can feel them like creeping up. And I don't think I used to feel that in my body before, and I'll feel it. And it's just a sign to me like, ooh, I need to even just pause and do some shoulder rolls or neck rolls. And,
Right.
just that awareness. I have so much stronger awareness of, I think, how I'm showing up physically and emotionally in spaces now.
Yeah. So what advice would you have for teachers, that are really stressed out? We're coming up on the end of the year, and it's been like a horrific 3 years for most of us in schools. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. And what advice would you have for them?
Yeah. Well, I think that summer's kind of a cool time to play around with new routines and new things.
Yes.
So, it's a great time to figure out what time of day does work for me to build some kind of practice in for myself, and to experiment with what those practices could be. So mindfulness can be a lot of things. We often think of meditation, but it can be a mindful walk. It can be mindful listening, it can be mindful eating even. All of those things help bring awareness to the present moment and help us regulate and get back to our center. And so maybe even just experimenting with different things that bring you that anchor, that sense of self. Different practitioners, there's all kinds of people out there that have great mindfulness programs and apps that you can listen to. And so I would say, if you're curious, experiment with it in the summer, perhaps find a something that feels good and a fit to you, and start thinking about, how do I start day one of next school year with this practice in place, knowing that, best laid plans, they get in the way. And so, being kind to yourself when it maybe doesn't go according to plan, and just keep at it. It took me, I would say it was like, from that very first time that I thought, yeah, maybe I need to figure this out, it was probably a year and a half, really, honestly. Starting it, going, that's not working, going away from it, and then coming back to it again, thinking, well, no, I think I need to keep trying this, until I found that what I needed to do was give myself 10 minutes every morning.
Yep.
And since then, I've built it in even more times during my school day. But, just being patient and being kind to yourself is whole part of the gig that sounds so easy and is so hard to do.
So hard, I know. And as you were talking, I was thinking about, I actually bought a meditation book when I was in college, and I didn't start meditating until I think 25 years later or something like that. Yeah. So it could take 25 years to finally start actually doing it. And, I also was thinking about, my wife would always make fun of me when I was a teacher, because I'd work so hard, and then it'd be the summer, and I'd just be like relaxing, and I'd like go to the gym like every day and play basketball, do all the things I never had time to do during the school year. And then I always have this very logical schedule for like when the school year started back. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to the gym Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, whatever. And then she's like, by the third week, you've already like stopped going to the gym. And she'd always kind of make fun of me for the fact that every year I would say, okay, this is the year that I'm going to follow my like fall plan. Yeah. And I'm saying this because I imagine some teachers are like, well, I could get it done during the summer, but then the school year is going to come and I'm going to be back in the craziness. But what I would add, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is that, it is like building a muscle, like you said, just kind of getting used to it and building the habit. So if you could build the muscle during the summer, maybe do it every day for 10, 20 minutes or, longer times, because you have more free time. And then when the school year comes, then you start to think like, how can I stay disciplined to do 5 minutes every morning or 5 minutes at lunch or whatever?
Yeah. Well, I would say it is a little bit of discipline for sure, recognizing and remembering why is this going to matter? What is this giving me back? What am I gaining from this time? Yeah. But then it's that self-compassion piece when you do get off track, because I think one of the hardest things that we struggle with is this conversation around boundaries. Yes. Is because they're hard to hold. And so we do let our boundaries go sometimes, and maybe we do start working from home more than we want to, or, we say yes to a project that we shouldn't have. And then kind of our tendency can be like, oh, I already let that go. I might as well, just, and that's a huge thing that mindfulness has taught me, is like, I can always stop and start again. Yes. So maybe I didn't hold that boundary very well this week or this month or whatever it's been. Let me go back to it. Let me try it again. And even still, are there mornings that I don't meditate? Sure. There are days that I'm like, I think I'm going to get 10 more minutes of sleep.
Yeah.
Or
Do you feel differently? I'm
whatever
curious.
it is. Exactly.
Yeah.
You know,
Do you
but
feel differently though when you miss the morning?
sometimes,
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't.
Yeah.
Because, it's something that I do enough that I think I've
Mhm.
had that built up pretty good.
Yes. Yes.
But I think if it's a really stressful time for me and I don't do that 10 minutes, I will feel it a lot
Yes.
quicker than a slower week where I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love what you brought up. You brought this up a couple times, just like really having self-compassion. And
Mhm.
I don't know if you're familiar with, I think it's Kristen Neff. I think
Yeah.
she's doing a lot of work in schools, right? Yeah. So do you work with her in your school, or do you know about her?
I haven't had a chance to work with her, but I have definitely followed her work. And I think she's a game changer for educators because it's up to us. Like we have to be compassionate with ourselves. No one else can offer us self-compassion,
Exactly.
but it's not a skill we're taught.
Yeah.
It's not something that people talk with us about a lot. And it's really hard. It can feel selfish.
Mhm.
And that's the roadblock for a lot of folks, just like me caring for myself when I first started doing it felt
Yeah.
fish.
Yeah.
But it really is such a key to showing up more authentically, being more present. I'm less distracted during the day. That is not to say I'm never distracted,
Oh yeah.
but it's less often,
Yeah.
and when I am not tough on myself about it. I'm just like, oh yeah, what is that telling me? I get curious, like why am I
Right.
distracted today? And it just changes things. Reminding myself I'm only one person in this whole cog of the school system, and I don't
Yeah.
have to be everything to everyone all day long. And that's not realistic, and that's okay. And no one's actually expecting that of me.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And I was going to ask you, like, what are some of your self-compassion practices? But you just listed a couple there. Like you said that you start to the way you talk to yourself,
Hmm.
and also noticing when that you don't have to do everything. So yeah, what are some of the practices that you use?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I go to a therapist because I just value that
Yeah.
time to think and reflect. And she is really helpful to me in building that self-compassion. It's been a lifelong struggle for me. I've always been a really tough self-critic, which I think a lot of us are.
Oh yeah.
Um, and learning to believe the compliments and the praise that I do get, just really accepting that and saying, okay, someone is really telling me this because it's true.
Yeah.
And letting that be was actually very difficult for me. So I'm getting better at that.
Yeah.
But like caring for myself, if I feel tired, I listen to that. There are of course times I have to push through because of XYZ, but if I can say, you know what, my body's saying it's tired tonight,
Yeah.
I'm gonna just rest. I feel like that's very self-compassionate. Or um, you know, uh journaling and reflecting and gratitude practices, they
Yeah.
all kind of work together. There's no one thing that I've done
Yeah.
that's it, but like you said, it's a list of practices and things that you do with intention. Um,
Yes.
but that being said, starting somewhere with one thing first, not trying to do
Yes.
all the things at
Yeah.
once.
Just maybe some turtle steps. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and
Yeah.
I heard you say, when something goes wrong, or you use curiosity instead of judgment. And I feel like that. So what you're sharing there is you're bringing awareness to what's going on, and then you're saying like, oh, I'm not going to judge myself or beat myself up. And then
Mhm.
you're kind of like managing your thoughts too. So if your thoughts start to say all these mean things to yourself, then you're able to be like, wait, let's just bring some curiosity instead of the judgment. And it kind of shifts your whole nervous system and the way you feel, and like your shoulders and everything, right?
Oh, 100%. I feel it immediately, physically, and I still go to that critical spot, and I catch it. I just catch it earlier and quicker now. And it's a whole emotional and physical shift that I feel when I'm like, I'm a human being, and it's okay to feel like I'm not doing enough, but it doesn't mean that I'm not doing enough.
Yeah. So I'm so curious about so your role at the school, do you
Mhm.
work with adults and kids?
Yeah, I do now. So I am in kind of a dual role where I office in our early childhood building, and I serve as their school counselor. And then I'm the director of counseling and community well-being for our school as well, which puts me kind of looking at the 30,000-foot view of all of our counseling and wellness programming, including our SEL,
Yeah.
and supporting adults in engaging in that work for themselves and for their students, it's a brand new role. So we're
Oh,
kind of
good.
figuring it out as we go, but it's been tremendously rewarding.
Well, the reason I asked you about it is because as I was digging in on finding people to interview for the podcast, I noticed that a lot of people, I'm like, oh, they seem super cool, but they're typically doing work with kids, which
Yeah.
is great. And you can glean a lot of amazing lessons for adults. But I was really interested in talking to people that are actually doing work, or at least starting to do work with adults. And I think the role that you have, every school in America needs to have in their schools, right? For adults and for the kids. But we all talk about the kids, and obviously it's a huge problem, right? Like everyone suffered from this pandemic, and the kids especially. We know this as educators, but
Mhm.
like the adults are also really struggling.
They are.
And so I think it's really important that we're also talking about, to our original point, how do we help the adults so that they're showing up whole and more full for the kids that they're serving.
Exactly. Yeah, it's certainly a goal for us to get to a place where our adults are saying, I feel very cared for in my school. I feel very supported. I feel like I have tools and resources to take care of myself. Um, 'Cause I mean, ultimately that impacts the children,
Yeah.
and uh turnover is high in education right now. And so it's almost a little bit like good for us too, to keep our adults and keep our people here.
Yeah.
But really, our work is hard work. It is
Yes.
taxing work. And I know I don't need to say that probably to this audience. But sometimes it's great to be validated that what you do is hard. It takes tremendous emotional and mental energy all day long. I don't remember what the statistic is, but there's some statistic out there about the number of decisions an educator makes in
Oh,
a day.
I only imagine. Yeah.
It's astounding.
Yeah. And these are like important decisions, and like sometimes really quickly about like young people's lives.
Exactly. And just in the moment, how many times we have to pivot and react and respond, and we only can do that for so long without refueling before we're going to start handling it maybe how we didn't want to,
Yep.
or shutting down and not handling it,
Mm.
or starting to point blame on others because we've run out of our reserves and our resources. And it's critical for educators and the education field to be looking at the care of the adults in the schools.
Yeah. And we're just reached a point where, like you said, there's a high turnover, and there needs to be a focus on this. And like you said before, like you're not really taught self-compassion, or I actually went back to my graduate school to do a talk on mindfulness meditation, and I was scared to death because it's Stanford University. So I was like, okay, this is going to be interesting. Like this is literally like the intellectual, like it's a known entity for intellectualism. And so, but I went back and I was like, I'm doing it. And it got really good reviews. And this was like, last summer. So it was during or last like 6 months ago.
Mhm.
And it was well received because people are like, there's a total crisis and we can't think our way out of it. We
Mhm.
can't go back and do, a research study on this. I mean, of course that helps, but like we actually have to come back to our hearts and open up, our emotions, and really get clear with like what we've just experienced and the PTSD we've had. And they were like really curious and
Oh,
really
good.
open. And the director of the program was like, we need you to come back. This is the point I was trying to make. We need you to come back to the school with all of our new teachers in training
Mm.
during orientation. And it made me realize that in my whole year, it was like a 12-month intensive master's. My whole year there, I did not ever have anybody say like, hey, teaching's a really hard profession. they did say it in some ways, but they didn't say, so please take care of yourself. They
Right.
probably said it, but the point is they didn't give me any tools. Like they probably, I heard a lot of the, don't coach basketball in the first year. It's a hard job. First year is really hard, that kind of stuff. But they never said like, oh, and by the way, we're going to teach you about, how to set boundaries, and we're going to teach you how to not have negative thoughts, and we're going to teach you how to love yourself and, believe in yourself and not judge yourself and all these things. And it's like, that should be the whole entire year-long course about how to go into education, because you're spending the whole day with these kids, like all these humans, little humans and adult humans that are just full of needs. And if you don't know how to take care of your own self, there's no way you're going to make it out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And we think of like grit and resilience as like go, 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 and keep charging no matter what. And the missing piece to that is what you have to do to be able to keep going forward, persisting. And I think it's kind of like a missed opportunity when we're thinking about that for educators, because they are going all day.
Oh, all the time. Yeah. I remember just trying to get lunch. And, anyway, it's like you're just shoving it in your face.
Yeah.
And so what kind of things are you doing at your school? Have you started doing things with adults yet, or are you still in process?
Yeah, so we are working with our adults to get them opportunities to engage with things like a mindful self-compassion course or mindful communication courses. And then we're also working with our mindfulness coach to, she does some work with our adults at meetings and different places. She'll come in and she'll say, here's a tool for you, and here's a tool for your students. And so adults can kind of come at that wherever they're comfortable with, or maybe they don't even use either tool, but eventually kind of what happens is, you start hearing some buzz about like, oh, I've been doing this and it's really been helping.
Yep.
We're trying to open meetings, more connective relationship building strategies. Just saying like, what's something that's been happening in your world that you're bringing into this meeting with you right now that might make it hard to be present in the meeting. Checking on each other more often.
Yes.
We actually did this really great activity as our administrative team that we're thinking about expanding out, and it's called a user manual. And I wish I could remember the name of the guy who is based off of his work. But we filled out this survey, and it was, how do I show up when things are going really well? What might you notice about me when I'm in high stress? How do I like to receive praise? How do I like to receive constructive feedback? What's the best way to reach me during the day? And it was really powerful activity for us to do as administrators, just to bring in that human element of how we work and how we show up, and what I want people to do for me when I'm overwhelmed at work, and what I don't want people to do for me. And we're really trying as an administrative team to live these things and model these things ourselves before we're asking our other faculty and
exactly
do it. Yeah.
No, I love that so much. And I actually do leadership trainings for like all, schools and corporate organizations. And I always just start with emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
So I loved it when you said your husband's organization was also doing meditation. I was like, oh, I wonder if that's a company. And I was curious about that. But I always start there, because I feel like then you can just break it with emotional intelligence. And before you start talking about mindfulness and stuff like that, because sometimes people are turned off by that. But you really break it down to, what are some simple practices? Like you said, the user manual activity. It's like really knowing yourself and knowing how you are leadership is like knowing yourself and how you affect others, right? And how you influence others and how you impact others. And so, but I love all those different ideas you have for the adults. And like I said, I wish every school in America would do this. So hopefully, we were joking before about getting, millions of subscribers on YouTube. So as the millions of people come on, maybe they'll start listening to us and they'll have it all over schools in America.
Well, and I think it's remembering that, one of the things that stops us so much is, well, how much time do we need to do that? And how much money would that cost? And, there's things that we can do that don't take a lot of time and don't cost a lot of money, but have big impact, and not being afraid to lean into those. as a starting place,
Yeah.
like we've started a few whole school meetings this year with a mood meter.
Oh, nice.
And we just took the big, Post-it papers and made paper mood meters and put markers out. And we just invited teachers and staff as they came in to put an X on the mood meter with where they were
Smart.
today, and just bringing some of that to us. Like, how do you feel?
Yes.
It's valid for you to feel however you feel. Like, you don't even have to come into this meeting. There's even that pressure to like show up and be happy when you're not feeling happy.
Exactly.
That's not real. Like, how are you really doing today? And what do you need?
No, it's so wonderful. And, with that circle I was telling you about that we do with the adults at the school. Now we do it with the kids too, but it's very like rigorous and structured. And the first thing is to check in on like, what's your emotion? Well, actually, the first thing is a 2-minute, we call it True North instead of meditation, but it's 2-minute meditation. And we start every meeting with that, right? To your point, so that you can kind of get clear on like, where am I? And then you share your feelings quickly around the circle. So, and any feeling is valid, right? But I feel like just by doing that, you're acknowledging with yourself, like, how am I feeling? And you might stay grumpy, you might still stay with that feeling if it's not positive, right? Or you might be like, oh, I got to say it out loud to everybody. And now I'm like, I did a nice little breathing exercise and now I can kind of let it go and be present in the space. And then the other thing I was going to share that I thought was interesting is I'm actually piloting this program with teachers that's very simple, where it's like a 3 to 5 minute video 3 days a week. So they listen to a video or an audio 3 to 5 minutes per week. And then once a month, we meet for an hour. So it's like, because the biggest thing I get when I talk about doing teacher programs is, well, they don't have time. Like if you try and get them to have another meeting after school, they're going to be so annoyed. So I just, one day in meditation, I was like, oh, I had the idea. I was like, oh, I know what I could do. I could just do like little short videos and then, it'll help them with practice throughout the week. And then when we meet at, monthly, we can then, so I'm piloting it with a school in South Dakota and it's going really well. And they're able to listen to the videos or the audio while they're driving or, on a lunch break, like just in their little breaks throughout the day. And then, but those little videos and audios are helping them get clear with some of these like simple practices like we're talking about. And then we can kind of go deeper in the meeting. So to your point, there's a lot of things we can do. It doesn't have to be this whole large, expensive, 30-day program. It can be really simple and be incorporated into their daily practice.
Exactly. If people will feel your intention, if your
Yes.
intention is to support them and that you can make that come through, that will be felt.
Absolutely. All right. Well, as we wrap up here, I'd love to just hear, are there any other things you'd want to share before we say goodbye today? And anything you'd like to share, like a website or anything like that about any work you're doing?
Sure. Well, I'm anxious to read a new book that I just learned about this week. It's called Inner Switch.
Okay.
By Susan Freeman. And she writes about, she's been an executive coach for a long time and using her mindfulness and yoga practices, what she's learned from those with executive coaches.
Yeah.
And how it's shown up in their work and improved their work lives. And so I'm really curious to read her book. I think that there'd be a lot of through lines. So that's a resource that I'm kind of keen on checking out here soon. Yeah, and I would just say, I think it's just, meeting each day with really, truly honesty about yourself and where you are, accepting that, being okay with that, and knowing that there are things that you can do to just start to shift it. And it's not an overnight, like, okay, I did this yesterday and now I feel so much better. So just trusting the process of sticking with something as simple as really checking in with yourself and your mood and taking some slow breaths on a regular basis will start to yield the kind of results that you're looking for.
I 100% agree. And I think that's like great parting advice is just take it, be patient with yourself, be compassionate, just keep it simple. We always overcomplicate everything because we're humans. Keep it simple, start wherever feels the most comfortable. If it's just walking and looking at a flower for a minute, anything that you can do to kind of just calm your busy mind and all the chaos and all of that. And then I'm going to check out that Inner Switch book because I just recently started getting a lot of executives coming into my practice. So I'm starting to work with a lot of people that are doing, in leadership positions that really want to know how can this way of living and this leadership style really help them in their work. So I'm going to check that out too. But anyway, any other things you want to share, like websites or anything? Or are you good?
I think I'm good. I mean, I would share that our school is working, one of the tools that we use is a program called Mindful Schools.
Okay.
And that is where a lot of our teachers have done that mindful self-compassion course, which I actually think is with Kristen Neff, or based on, and the mindful communication. The mindfulness 101 is actually a course that is about your own practice as an adult. And the mindfulness 201 is your practice with your students. And so it's really set up just kind of how we were talking, it's really important to start with the adults. And so I think some of our adults go into it thinking they're going to learn about their students first, and they find out, nope, you're going to learn about how to do this for yourself first. And it's really powerful.
Awesome. Well, I feel like folks are walking away with a lot of great resources. So appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking the time today. It was great having this conversation with you.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Thanks, Lindsay.